This is God and Autobiography, the podcast, a dramatic adaptation and continuing discussion of the book God and Autobiography as Told to a Philosopher by Jerry L. Martin. He was a lifelong agnostic, but one day he had an occasion to pray. To his vast surprise, God answered in words. Being a philosopher, he had a lot of questions, and God had a lot to tell him. Episode 185. Welcome to God and Autobiography, the podcast. I'm Scott Langdon, and this week, for our 18th edition of our Life Wisdom Project series, Abigail Rosenthal joins Jerry for another intriguing discussion as the two break down episode 18 of our podcast called God Explains Polytheism in a Way I Understand. That's no easy task, as God presents Jerry in episode 18 with the seemingly simple yet very complex truth that we are each particular manifestations of God while also appearing as and interacting as separate from one another. How can both of these things be true? And what are the implications for our lives? Here now are Jerry and Abigail unpacking their thoughts on that question, among others. I hope you enjoy the episode.
Well, I'm very pleased to have my wonderful wife, Abigail Rosenthal, as her published name, author of the forthcoming book, Confessions of a Young Philosopher, among other things. But to discuss this very interesting episode, God tells me in this episode, early people saw my presence everywhere, saw the spiritual indwelling of things, their powers and potencies, and the divine element in all that. But there was always an awareness, however dim, that there was a single spiritual reality behind them all. And then he tells me there are many gods, but only one God with a capital G, and I am he. So I take it part of the message here for daily living is, well, notice the divine and the things around you. Mm-hmm. You know, if God's showing through things, well, it's good to pause and notice that and take in the divine dimension as far as you detect it there, and take that into your soul, you might say, into how you're approaching life. Yeah. But of course, that isn't the end of the story here. You know, there are many gods, but one God, and I am he.
Yeah. In Hebrew scripture, there's a conflict between the two, and I suppose the pagans felt that way about Judeo-Christian monotheism. We can't have both coexisting, but in our late day, apparently, it's okay. You know, well, what was formerly subversive on the one side and on the other side now can, without too much discomfort, take their places side by side. I'm thinking of what you responded to in Andrew Wyeth's paintings, that, and you certainly wouldn't call that man a pagan, but very present to things without a sort of theological overlay, which we rightly or wrongly associate with monotheism, that there are a bunch of words that you have to siphon everything up toward.
And as it were, without any overlay.
Yeah.
You know, I can't remember. I think I've said he let the divine show through.
Yeah.
You know, in just his grainy portrayal of the surface of things.
Yeah.
The divine just show through.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, and of course, that's what an artist permits. That's the painterly view of things. You don't force them into a story. They tell you what they want you to see almost. And they have a drama which is nonverbal. Funny,
Yeah.
funny nonverbal drama.
Yeah, and God is often, I'm not very aesthetic, as you know. I say I don't respond to flat things normally, but God is often using analogies to art in the whole of godanautobiography. And I guess in our daily life, you take in the divine in art, you take it in nature, you take it in music, and it's to be sort of vibrantly alive to those things. Let them sink into you. Don't put skeptical barriers or theoretical barriers or theological barriers in between you
Yeah,
and what is presented in the experience.
yeah. It seems God is not, how to say, puritanic about our, in a way, worshiping nature or seeing it as divine per se without subsuming it under theological categories. I was struck by what God says about fire, that fire is a thing in nature, but it's a physical metaphor, as if things, you don't need metaphors, things themselves can carry in themselves um, some kind of message, or you might say theoretical value, uh, with wordlessly, they simply are what you talk about.
Kind of complex, not a kind of simple divine showing through. It's not kind of simple, encountering the thou in nature or something, but the fire is very complex
Yeah,
um, physical metaphor with contradictory aspects, and that's part of what's fascinating about it.
yeah.
It warms you and it also can burn you and so forth. So it's attractive and frightening at the same time. And yeah, and that's, I guess people more poetic than I am can take those things in more readily. But here God told me, so I wrote it down.
Yeah, the fascination of fire, that it has all these characteristics, created out of nothing, disappears into nothing, grows and dies, gives life and warmth, as well as pain and destruction, looks both hypnotically attractive and frightening.
Yeah.
That sort of tolerance for things that don't fit neatly into one category or another seems part of what's coming through in this passage, as if God is encouraging a tolerance.
Yeah, later I am told in some context in this episode, as I'm often told elsewhere in God and Autobiography, think more both and, less either or. We think monotheism or polytheism,
Yeah,
either or.
yeah.
And wait. God, you might say, is spilling out in all directions.
Uh-huh.
And there's there are the gods, you think of fire as a kind of god, and
Yeah,
then there's God, which is the spiritual unity or presence behind it all. I don't know, where exactly to go with that, but uh, you also need to, well, and in terms of practical life, since there is a God, you need to, I think the language used here is you need to be in concert with God. You need to be, I sometimes think musically, you need to be in rhythm and step or something like that with God.
uh-huh. Yeah, and rhythm and step are different from putting things together, mapping the world conceptually, because these two aspects, these two puzzle pieces don't slide together. You can't make a single puzzle out of them. And if you want to, it's disconcerting and frustrating. Yeah, so it seems as if at some times a certain rhythm predominates. At other times, a quite different rhythm calls for you to get in step with it. And what's asked of us is non-dogmatically to be alert to these changes in the rhythm of things. My art teacher at the Art Students League long ago quoted a Chinese definition of art, the spirit of life through the rhythm of things. So it seems as if that's one inference to draw here. Be attentive to the rhythm of things and the spirit of life speaking through the rhythm of things.
Yes, and that does suggest paying attention to one's own rhythms. We have rhythms, biological, emotional, and one needs to not just deflect or override those, that one should pay attention to them and take in whatever they have to tell you.
Yeah.
They're often prompting things, actions, reactions, further emotions, further thoughts.
Yeah. It's a sort of, what comes to my mind is a message of something like reverence, which warns one against saying this is not important. For example, I'm not important. How my body feels right now is unimportant compared to things truly important. And perhaps who are we to assign these rankings to experience? I didn't create my body. Maybe my body is trying to talk to me. And I don't have to say, you're the dumb one. You sit in the back of row of the class. I want to hear from the bright kids, the ones who talk in words. But no, that might not be quite fair.
Yeah, and the body may want something from you after all, right? And I'm just not talking about, the body's hungry or tired or something like that, but it might be deeper than that.
Yes.
We're whole organic beings after all.
Yeah.
If spiritually embodied beings, and our bodies may be full of wisdom for all we know. You have to pay a lot of attention to find out.
Yeah. If God is, as this passage tells us, can be in trees and forests and lakes and mountains, God can also be in our bodies, which have many organs and which work together in very complicated ways to make possible a human story. But the different components that work together perhaps have their own needs, which could be perhaps emotional, not just chemical.
Yeah. So pay attention to those things. But I also want to call your attention to God shortly thereafter, after God telling me about there are many gods, but only one God.
Mm-hmm.
I ask, what is your relation to the God of Israel? And of course, this harkens to my tradition, you might say, Judeo-Christian tradition, but the God of Israel. And, in that first prayer I ever had, when a voice spoke, and I said, "Who is this?" It wasn't me talking. And I am God. And then I say, the God of Israel, I am the God of all. And you don't know how to parse that because, well, the God of Israel can be the God of all. And I think by the time, and I didn't know what that meant because this was the first encounter. By the end of the book, you do seem to find out, well, something like what he's telling me here. God says, in answer to that question, the God of Israel is one face of me.
Mhm.
It is really me. Sometimes that one face language used by people makes it sound as if it's all metaphors or something like that. But no, God says it is really me.
Yeah,
And I did undergo the development and recorded pretty accurately
yeah,
in the Hebrew Bible.
yeah, quite astonishing, really.
Yes.
Modern people read that as if this was a primitive phase of human development when they didn't have a very high-minded notion of God, God getting into battle and God getting angry, um, God deviating from his supposed um, above the battle character, like a Hallmark card. What's he doing down here in the dirt with the rest of us? And here God says, no, I was down here in the dirt with the rest of us. Uh, yeah. Uh, as you know, I have a inherited and actually quite actual relation to the God of Israel. And it's never, well, I wouldn't say never, but it hasn't been a fun ride from from ancient times to the present. Um, and I always felt about the God of Israel that, or I have come to feel that that God knows us as fully um, uh, multifaceted, complex, real persons without idealizing us, without selecting out some favored part of us, but taking our human reality as something God requires of us, as if we're not supposed to lie about who we are, and we're supposed to engage in the necessities of human life in tandem with a God who recognizes us and whom we recognize. There's a kind of mutual recognition between us as people and God that allows us to take people very seriously, not to think this is a lower level of existence. No, the human level is in a way ultimate and of the greatest seriousness. Uh, and when we express our relationship in prayer, which is to say, in conversation with God, we're being very sincere, or at least we're called upon to be very sincere. So this is the drama of personal life seems to me um, vindicated in the God of Israel.
And it doesn't, when people often don't like it, they read the Hebrew Testament and, well, the God doesn't seem quite so perfect. And of course, in fact, I was just told the story of God's development is part of what the Hebrew Testament is about. But the people aren't perfect. The great heroes, one after another, have these flaws and missteps and so forth.
Yeah.
And these are the patriarchs, these are the heroes. Look at David later, beyond Genesis. Here David is just doing terrible things. He had an affair with this woman and made sure her husband got killed in battle. Well, that's pretty bad. And who is it? The prophet Nathan or somebody comes after and tells him a parable about some bad guy. And then he says, and David, you're the bad guy, something like that. But but that doesn't stop any one of us. Mm-hmm. Our imperfections do not stop us from being the partners God needs in this situation now.
Yeah.
And we need to step up, even with our imperfections.
Yeah. It's that side of God, which is kind of hard, says don't rise above it. Don't rise above the human condition. It's a important challenge to be in the human condition. And if there's some reason you want to scramble out of it, take another look at that, because you might be dishonestly getting above it or scrambling out of it.
So one of the things you were suggesting, Abigail, was you got to be honest with yourself up front.
Yeah.
Don't go around pretending to be perfect. If something matters to you, don't say it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Don't shuffle it under. If you feel called upon to do something, either you might say that you feel it has a divine stamp on it, or it's just your situation. Something calls you to help somebody, to take care of somebody, to do your duty, to repay your debts, whatever it might be that you've called upon to do. Don't deflect that.
Yeah.
Take it in honestly, and we can live with our imperfections. We act them out, but even the imperfect person, even as imperfect as we are, we're trying to do our best. And your best is all you can do, after all. So you're trying to do your best, and your best might not be the best. It might not even be the best you're always capable of, but maybe at some future time you'll be able to do something that at this moment you can't quite rise to. Yeah. But your point, I take it, is don't rise above it. Don't try to step outside of your situation. Don't try to even step outside of your character, because you are who you are. And I often think, when I'm thinking of my own imperfections, and here I've got this big mission that God gave me. Well, I'm the instrument. And if God had wanted a perfect instrument, he would have found one. But the instrument he found was Jerry Martin. And with my little mixed bag of goods and bads and talents and untalents. And that's what you got to do. You got to, you're not born perfect. You're not given the perfect upbringing, the perfect situation, the perfect anything. But that doesn't stop the drama. That defines the drama.
Yeah, it's kind of hard. I could make a long list of the traits I lack. And don't have this one, lack this one, not sufficient, too much. And hey, settle down with you, with what you're bringing to the situation. That's going to have to suffice. The only requirement I would add, I don't see it in this passage, but it might be implicit, is don't wait around till you get to be good enough to do this, or till you can clear the decks, or till you can settle your mind. Just get on it. If there's something like a call, and if you're wrong, that wasn't a call, well, that's not normally a big tragedy. You can be wrong, but don't wait around, don't stall. Take this drama as an actor would take his part on the stage, his or her part. You're on. this is your scene, never mind if your socks need pulling up, you're on.
Yeah, and you can't even do it 3 minutes later because
No.
you're in dialogue with another character, so you can't pause and get your arms more comfortable or feet more comfortable or something. No,
Yeah.
you've got to be right at your moment,
Yeah.
like the way on stage you're at your mark, in spatial
Yes.
terms.
Yeah.
You've got your temporal mark as well. You've got to be on. And
Yeah.
that's pretty hard.
It's like a race, when the gun goes off or something, the racers have to go. They might be ready or not. But so there is that sense that you can't stall around with the divine human connection. To take it literally is to take it that inadequate as you might feel yourself to be, you're on.
Yeah.
Your move.
Or maybe you feel you just can't face it right now, or it seems so hard, or you got some other personal priority getting in the way. Ray Silverman, who's done one of these life wisdom episodes and teaches students the Ten Commandments. He really teaches life wisdom through the Ten Commandments. And what he does is have students write, I don't know, it's papers or in a journal, keep journals, and he like, what is your idolatry? What do you put in the place of God? And the answer he says that he gets way more than any other is procrastination. And I wouldn't have thought of that as a kind of idolatry, but it's blocking,
Yeah.
their partnership with God
Yeah.
and with everything else in their lives by just putting off.
The first words that inaugurate the relation that will be the one between Israel and God are Lech-Lecha, get up and get out. And it isn't recorded that Abraham said out there, I have to
Next year,
my library card or my father's idols still need another dusting, or whatever the rabbinic midrashes that Abraham's father was running an idol shop.
yes,
And he got the call. Be that as it may, the point was not next week, now.
yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the adventure and the drama of the human divine interaction. There's a rhythm to that too.
And another interesting thing in this very episode is a rejection. It's strange because, God is sort of in everything. It seems to be the polytheism message, this kind of nature, God's presence in nature and art and all around us.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, if God is sort of in everything or is everything, then does that mean God is me or in me? And God says, yes. And I said, but I talk to you, and God says, again, this is maybe where he says, don't think either or, think both and, because you can have a differentiation. And God says, well, you're a specific manifestation of me, and I'm in fact a specific manifestation of myself. So, okay. So there's both sameness and difference. And I was told from the beginning, and it's very puzzling if you have a philosophical mind and you want the pieces to all fit together. But it turns out that makes love the key. We're different enough that we need to be in a loving relation, and there's no love without difference. And in fact, love exists at all levels of reality, some sense of love down to what gravity does. And mystic merging is not quite right, God tells me, You need to live out your lives in relation to, in concert with me, but it would serve no purpose, karmic or otherwise, for you to get lost in me like a drop of water in the sea, which in some traditions is the goal.
Yeah.
And I know you were in city yoga for a time, and wouldn't that be one way to state what that Hindu tradition is about?
I'm just thinking of that time right now, and one of the deficiencies of it, one of the things that struck me as less than full-fledged real in that experience was that I was trying always to see other people as the same as me, that sameness being a divine substance. So it wasn't Abigail and it wasn't whoever. It was the third thing, the divine substance, that was the real part of the conversation. But that drained the actual space and time, whatever precipitates conversation. The actual conversation was drained of point, of pith, of heft, of consequence. The actual conversation became inconsequential. And I spent some time trying to awkwardly, I'm sure some people are much more successful than I was in this effort to merge with the divine, but I would try to go through some of the steps that are recommended in yoga and in this particular system that was in Siddha Yoga, the Vedantic system, and what finally precipitated me out of it was a realization that was not in the rule books, that something, as I perceived it, rather corrupt, had happened
in that particular
branch, in that particular organization, and that the mantras that say all is one were inadequate to detect, describe, understand, or know what to do about what I was perceiving. I was not perceiving it because all is one. I perceived that something has gone awry, and it was particular, and it was a drama. And I did not think that the all is one mantra would work there. Well, it was relevant, was applicable. I thought, and I'm not so powerful that I can pretend to be godlike and stay in this situation. I better scramble and get out of it. So, so much for my efforts to literally suppose that all is one, to take it, as far as I could take it.
Yeah. But you still meditate, right? You meditate each morning.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So
yes, I do, and I do hatha yoga. It's not that there aren't substantial gifts to be grateful for from that tradition, but I did not think it covered all bases.
Well, it sounds as if when we've talked about this other times, that for something like human rights or just basic respect for one another in situations, you need some sense of personhood, not just all in one and one in all, and we're in a big, put us in a blender and push the button and bzz, there we go. And it leaves the individual kind of defenseless.
Exactly.
You've got a guru, and there's some question I know from my Hindu friends there's so often the doctrine a guru can't do wrong. But wait a minute, gurus are also people, and you do hear reports, even in the sacred literature. And so it's not quite that they can't do any wrong, it's that they can somehow, wave their hands afterwards.
There's something missing there. We would chant I don't know if it's a hymn with music, but we didn't know the music, called the Song of the Guru Gita. And one of the verses says that you stand by the guru even if the guru falls. So in that particular hymn, it's acknowledged that the guru can fall. And, well, that's not good advice. If the guru can fall, you can fall with him or her. The people I know who have attached themselves to a guru have told me, in at least 2 cases, and my own would be a third, that the guru was involved in some hanky-panky of a sexual nature. And when the guru was male, the devotees included girls whose virginity or whatever it was not restored magically, or to put it more accurately, whose innocence and naivete was not restored magically, because naivete isn't like that. It isn't magically restored. If something happens that disillusions one has to think about that. What kind of sense can you make of that in life that happens? So I did come back to, though not without having benefited from this experience, what historians call the religion of Israel, a sense that we can't escape our historical situations, and that trying can involve a fair amount of bad faith. Trying is tricky.
Yeah. And so it sounds as if going through life, whatever the attractions and even the element of truth in a given spiritual orientation, or might be political ideology or some other philosophy, whatever its attractions, whatever its degree of truth, you got to keep your wits about you. And it's almost like you got another Eastern practice is martial arts. And so you need some bit of making sure you got your feet on the ground, your balance, aren't throwing yourself forward into something where you haven't really seen what that can lead to.
And there are dangers, there are powers in the meditative practice. I recall a colleague of mine whom I greatly respected. He had a yoga teacher, and he said about that yoga teacher, the so-and-so, I'm not quoting literally, has reached the lower stages of samadhi, which is bliss if you get to the higher stages. And sometime not too long after that, I met the so-and-so, and I could feel that there was a power radiating from him. He certainly had reached the lower stages of something, but I didn't want to be around him. That's not a good guy, and he won't make a good use of these powers. Just watch it, Abigail. In fact, sorry, got to go now.
Yes.
Have a good time in samadhi.
Yeah. And there again, you've got to pay attention. Your body is part of what's telling you this, but you got to pay attention to yourself and what your total self is telling you. And I know you have told me that some kind of instruction about how women should cope with situations.
My martial arts teacher at the 92nd Street Y told me that and said, when somebody is prepared to be aggressive, they're giving off a certain odor. and you're picking it up subliminally. And pay attention to that. If you don't want to get on, you might be smelling something that you're not aware of. Mm-hmm. So, and life is like that. I don't know if one's intuitions are more infallible than one's understandings on a more verbal level, but they're part of the mix and they should be respected. Even if my intuition is wrong, there's a question, well, why am I having that intuition? Is it something about me, or is it something that I'm perceiving? So life, there doesn't seem to be a formula for getting through life. It seems to be a subtle, complex, many layered project.
Well, that's a wonderful conclusion right there, sweetheart. And thank you for being on this Life Wisdom episode with me. It's a very rich episode, and I think we had a great discussion.
Okay, Jerry, I agree. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to God and Autobiography, the podcast. Subscribe for free today wherever you listen to your podcasts and hear a new episode every week. You can hear the complete dramatic adaptation of God and Autobiography as Told to a Philosopher by Jerry L. Martin by beginning with episode 1 of our podcast and listening through its conclusion with episode 44. You can read the original true story in the book from which this podcast is adapted, God and Autobiography as Told to a Philosopher, available now at Amazon.com and always at godanautobiography.com. Pick up your own copy today. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, please email us at questions@godanautobiography.com and experience the world from God's perspective, as it was told to a philosopher. This is Scott Langdon. I'll see you next time.